Well, let's get talking now. Nigerian presidential elections have finally come and gone. And the candidate of the ruling All Progressives Congress, Bola Tinubu, has been declared the winner of the poll, defeating his closest rivals, the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party and the Labour Party, to emerge president-elect. However, in the wake of a political campaigns, Mr. Bola Tinubu disclosed to Nigerians his 10-point agenda, which served as his manifesto with an objective to foster a new society based on shared prosperity, tolerance, compassion, and unwavering commitment to treating each citizen with equal respect and due regard, with an urgent desire to stabilize an ailing economy, which is in dire state, through bold and assertive policy formulation as the country counts down to May 29 and handover ceremony of the new administration. Let's do some analysis of the economic agenda of the president-elect, Bola Tinubu. And to do this, I'm being joined live in our Lagos studios by public affairs analyst, Mr. Gbolahan Olojede. Is a friend of the house. It's good to have you, Mr. Olojede. It's good to start the week with you on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, it's good to be here again.
Well, let's start with Bola Tinubu's discussion even before the election. He talked about having a private sector-driven economy, which many would say is the way to go. Government cannot create the jobs we need. Government cannot take charge of infrastructure alone. Government cannot just do it alone. What's your take with regards to that? And what do you make of, I know it's a big document, but let's try and break it down. What do you really make of his economic blueprint?
Okay. If you look at the manifesto, I've read literally all the manifestos of the major parties anyway. So if you go to the economy segment of that manifesto, you will see the economy segment in 4 different areas. It spoke to the fiscal area. It spoke about monetary issues. Then it went to what they call the industrial policy and the housing policy. One of the things that modern economic planning demands is for those planners, for the decision makers to have an umbrella view. Because modern economic planning is not like what the way planning used to be. It involves a lot of integration. So when you look at those breakdown, the 1, 2, 3, 4, which is fiscal, monetary, industrial, and housing, they are all totally connected to one another. So if you look at the fiscal, for example, it started with the issue of budget process. How do we even arrive at the budget that we call the budget of federal government of Nigeria, which has hitherto been driven essentially by, okay, how many barrels of fuel are we going to sell? What is going to be the dollar exchange rate? Therefore, let's convert and begin to cut and dice it. Should that be how to drive an economy in this kind of, in the global world that we are today? No. So it started from there. They said, look, we need to change the way we even view budgeting as a planning document. And that is very critical. All across the world now, where there have been a lot of disruption, that is what is going on. Governments across the world are looking at what they can do differently to speak to the peculiarities of what is going on globally. It is not an accident, for example, that in America you are saying, no, we have 30-year all-time inflation. You come to the UK, you see a similar thing. You go to Germany, you see another 30-year. You go to Japan, you see the same thing. So there's something going on across the world that causes for caution to look at what can we do differently. So I believe this is where that is coming from. So from the budget process, it went into issues of infrastructure, infrastructure campaign. I believe this administration has set some sort of foundation which can be built upon. We have to be very creative about infrastructure financing and provision of infrastructure. Without infrastructure, you know, there's this old Chinese saying about roads, for example. It says, if you want to get rich, start by building roads. That is infrastructure. But it's actually a much deeper thing to look at. And if you think about what China has done it has literally brought that saying to life in China. And we have seen how it has transformed that place. So from infrastructure to issues of import substitution to tax reforms, from tax reform to issues around government revenue. Today we speak about how Nigeria's debt has become unsustainable. At the heart of unsustainability of Nigeria's debt profile is the fact that the revenue is extremely poor.
Yes.
So that particular bill spoke about optimization of revenue, not maximization, optimization. You see, it is the duty of government, whether you want to, government can say, oh, I'm going to use the private sector to drive the economy. But for that to happen, government itself has a role, which is to create the right environment for businesses to thrive, for individuals to pursue their happiness. When they do that, they will bring you those taxes that you want. You want tax revenue? Yes, but the businesses must prosper to give you those tax revenues. So there's a lot of things.
There's a lot, really a lot. Let me move very quickly to foreign exchange policy reforms, which is something that is also very important. And I know you also like to speak around that. Many have said having multiple exchange rates is one challenge that we've faced. Dr. Muda Yusuf, I can quote directly, will say it's a self-inflicted problem to us as a country. What do you think around that? Because I think that has a little to do around the monetary, where you talk about the foreign exchange, though within the support of the fiscal side too. But what do you think generally about that? We could also talk around agricultural reforms before we move to oil and gas.
We must sit and dissect exactly what the issues are. You see, contrary to some popular belief, exchange rate is not exactly as serious a problem as exchange rate stability. So it is not enough to say, oh, my exchange rate today is 500 naira to $1. Is it too much? Is it too small? I don't know. Where the problem comes in is if your exchange rate is 500 naira today, but by 2 months' time, it is now 550. Or a year after, it is 600. That is where the problem comes in, the volatility of the exchange rate. So we must go into asking those critical questions. Why is our exchange rate that volatile? And there are two sides to it. There are some things that are outside of our control now, but there are also things that are within our control that we need, which is why when you're talking of setting an agenda, you must even be looking at the time horizon. What should the administration do, say, in the first 100 days?
Yes.
What should it do in the short term, which is probably like a year, like that?
The quick wins.
The quick wins must be there. How did we get here? We had a country that had once produced 2.5 million barrels of oil per day.
Daily.
All of a sudden, it went from 2.5 to 931 over the years. It is a low-hanging fruit. I know we have picked up from that 931. We've started coming up. That must be sustained. In that immediate, it must be sustained. Because what would that do for us? It will help us to earn foreign exchange. Number two, we have awarded certain refinery contracts. Some of those refinery contracts, certain phases are beginning to mature. There's a phase of the Port Harcourt refinery that matures in April. Where do some of this money that we earn, where do they go to? We earn foreign exchange. Then we go and use a chunk of this foreign exchange to import refined petroleum products. If we can get our refineries to start working, we shut the door on that chunk of our foreign exchange that we use to import foreign exchange. So from the perspective of those ones that can come into activities, even in the short term, to those ones that will mature over the next 1 year. And then some will, I think the last one will be about 2025. If we can rein in all of this, then we begin to stabilize that foreign exchange situation. You don't want a situation in which airlines are saying, oh, Nigeria is the biggest debtor when it comes to being able to provide foreign exchange to airlines that are operating in our country.
Yeah. And some of them had to even shut down the route.
Yeah. Sometimes there is the industrialization policy, like I said.
Okay.
Well. Now, when you're talking of things that are from short term to medium term now, we now need to improve on the basis. The things you offer to the world to generate foreign exchange is at the heart of the stability of your foreign of your exchange rate. We are a consuming nation. We are not that productive. And that is where the industrial policy or industrial plan, national industrial plan, will come into play to ensure that we can take this country away from buy things that you are not able to produce and start to produce both goods and services, offer it to the world, and earn foreign exchange. When we begin to do this, we start to have multiple sources of foreign exchange. Number one, we have said, okay, our crude oil, let's be able to rev it up and get foreign exchange. Industrial policy, let's be able to produce and offer the world more things and get foreign exchange. These are some of those things that will start to stabilize the exchange volatility that we have. Like I said, exchange rate in itself, I'm sure that if you take the Korean won as of this morning, it might be about maybe 1,002 to $1, 1,200 to $1. Well, you want to joke about the economy of South Korea. It's a huge, solid economy. But what you're not going to find is that in Korea, it will not be 1,002 today, and then by tomorrow it's 1,003, or it goes to 1,000. That stability has to be there. So the issue of multiple rate, what multiple rate has done in this country is create opportunity for arbitrage and speculation. And people who are privileged have sat in that middle and milk the system. So part of what the next government must do is to intervene in that nexus, have a sit down with a central bank and the economic team, and we can work out something. We do not have to have this rate for this one, that rate for that one, and people are hiding in between all of these rates and milking the economy.
Sad.
That must come to an end.
Very, very, very valid point. Let's talk about the oil and gas sector. You know, this sector remains the mainstay of Nigeria's economy. Let's just tell ourselves the truth while we still try to diversify. Yes, exactly. And I was there live and direct at the NESG gathering where the president-elect said subsidy has to go. It has overstayed its shelf life and it has to go. While I would agree with that too, I'm thinking of the ripple effect. What are you thinking along that line? What do you think this government can do coming in so that this would not in any way affect governance or economic development in one way or the other?
There will be some pinch here and there when that finally goes. But you see, the transition process is also very important.
Very important.
I played a bit in oil and gas, and I'm privy to some of the things that happen in that particular space. The subsidy matter has become a deep hole of unaccountability. And we cannot continue to sustain fraud and corruption. We must deal with it. So the transition mechanism is part of what has to be worked out. In fact, my take will be that there is a team already. Don't forget that we made a budget this year.
Yes.
And in this year's budget, by June, there will be no longer provision for subsidy there. Sure. Of course, a new government could say, okay, let me present a supplementary to you because I want to extend that by 3 months. But for how long? Don't forget that this June that is coming was a postponement by 18 months. That was what took us to that June. When we did that, it was as if 18 months will never come. But 18 months is here already. So that process to midwife the transition is very important. It must be transparent. Let me give you an example of lack of transparency in that space. It's to say, how many liters of fuel do we consume in Nigeria? I remember hearing a minister, the minister for petroleum, saying he doesn't understand that number, that he doesn't trust the number. We must be able to provide that level of transparency that the populace will have a buy into, to understand exactly what you're saying and where you're going. It is when they do that, when they see the transparency, see where you're going, see the right things, that they can support your initiative to transit away from a subsidy regime into. And whatever cushions, don't forget that when we subsidize, we're just subsidizing everybody. Why are we subsidizing everybody? Is it everybody that cannot buy fuel? No. So someone is putting a fuel guzzler, he goes out in one, the wife goes out in another, the family goes out in another, and yet we're saying we should subsidize them to pay. No. The people we need to subsidize are the people at the lower rung of the ladder, So the selective application of whatever we want to do has to be there. The people who commute, the people who do not have fuel guzzlers to throw around on the roads, how do we ensure that those guys will not bear an unusual burden on this? Those are the things we need to focus on, not to assume that, oh, everybody has to be treated equally. Therefore, if we remove subsidy, it's not petrol that is used in manufacturing now. Even the trucks that are used for interstate movement of goods are not petrol. They're not petrol-based trucks. They are largely diesel-based trucks. Diesel has been deregulated a long time ago. So we need to speak honestly to ourselves about PMS, who are the people we are targeting for any form of palliative, and what would this palliative be? How will it be administered? Those are the kind of things we need to think about. But we must be able to confront that monster called fuel subsidy.
Well, interesting. The conversation is getting so interesting. I just looked at the time. Let's talk about, let's wrap up on the note of competence, of who holds which office. Many have talked about that Asiwaju Bola Tinubu has this eye for the best, one way or the other. What are you expecting? What kind of cabinet are you expecting? And you spoke on the quick wins. What more are the quick wins? Because I'm thinking of attracting foreign investment is very important at this time too.
Correct.
Take it over from there.
Yeah, the getting the right team is at the heart of everything. Like you said, he has a reputation for having done that in the past. I have had the privilege of presenting to the Exco of Lagos before on one transaction when I was in healthcare. And the quality of the discussion was phenomenal. So I have no doubt about that. Now, part of even the what I'll call the 100-day initiative that might even have started by now, in my opinion, is actually headhunting for certain critical role. It is not every role that can be a political reward. For some role, you're saying, I need the best, wherever I go and find the best Nigerian that could do this thing for me. And you give the headhunters, and they will go and fish the right people for you to do that. I'll give you an example. I don't expect the guy that will man electricity now to just be a political reward. It cannot be.
It's a lot of work.
Go and find the person who understands how these things work, who is a technocrat and has a leadership skill. Headhunt him and tell him to come and let him come and fill the role and deliver on what we need to deliver on. So, of course, you cannot rule out the issue of political reward, but for certain roles, it has to be the best of the best. It is part of those early day things that the government must work on. Putting round pegs and round holes. The resourcing is very important if it's going to succeed.
Interesting stuff. I talked about the quick wins and attracting investment. What are you thinking along that line? Because it's very important to our stock market, to our business environment.
The team is also an integral part of that.
That's true.
When people see a serious-minded professional manning a particular suit, they are more interested. In fact, they will come and start having discussion. Depending on where you also brought the guy from, he probably already has certain contact that will be useful for the role that you have given him. So when you say, we need investors, he knows where to pick the call and start getting all those investors to come. Whatever legal support that we need for our initiatives, for example, there are issues about credit system. The APC government want to run a credit system for mortgage and all those other ones. Student loans. Yeah. Now, those things, the legal framework for doing that, the institutional framework for doing that, and the leadership, the human resources that will drive that process are very important. And we need to start thinking about that. Then it also has to be a performance-driven government. So there are people, you have clear deliverables, and we will measure you by your deliverables at periodic intervals. If you're not up to scale, then we can ask you, we can give you a good handshake and ask you to step aside while we bring the people who will get the job done. So it has to be a performance-driven environment.
Interesting conversation as usual. It's great to start the week with Mr. Gbolahan Olojede. Thank you so much. It's been nice having you in the studio, breaking all of this down. I think this has to be in phases because there's a lot to talk about.
In fact,
where we're talking about.
There's a whole lot.
There's a whole lot in the plate. No, I think we'll continue this and find a way to get it done. But I must thank you so much, our public affairs analyst, Mr. Gbolahan Olojede, for speaking to us on the show.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you.